In this video tutorial, we're going to look at how we go about creating a piece of music using found sound. Found sound is essentially just sounds that we can record from nature or from any aspect of our lives that we want to use that aren't necessarily conventionally musical, but we can use them in a musical context. On your desktop, you should find a folder called Pick and Mix Session. Double-clicking this gives you access to a starting project, as well as a range of samples that we can use in our project and an audio file of our finished project. Let's have a quick listen to our project to see what we're going to work on. There are four main elements to this track. We've got drums, we've got a pad, we've got a rhythmic part and a lead part. And we're going to break these tutorials up into the different sections. So to begin with, enter Pick and Mix Session Project and open Pick and Mix Session Start. Ableton Live will open. And we have a blank canvas. You can see that I've pre-populated the different tracks. So we have a lead, a pad, a rhythm and drums. And I also have some audio files that we currently have in our project that we can use to build our track. If we want to listen to these, we can just quite simply press the play button. And pressing one of the stop buttons stops them. The main transport at the top here can be controlled using the play and stop buttons. Pressing the stop button twice returns our project to 1.1.1, the start. So we're going to start with our drums. Now at the moment we have no sound available on this drum track. We need to insert an instrument, and the one we are going to use is called Impulse. On the left hand side, make sure that Instruments is selected from the Categories menu and drag Impulse onto your drum track. This gives us a range of pads that we can populate with different sounds. So we're going to start with the kick drum. For this, I've used a sonic boom recorded by NASA, and it's this track here. If we double click the track, we can see the audio that we have available to us. To zoom in, if we hover over the bars and beats and then click and drag up and down, we can zoom in, and equally we can drag the project around. Once we are zoomed in, we can click and drag to the left. And what we find is that this section, at approximately halfway through bar 5 going into bar 6, we have some sound. If we want to listen to that, we can hover the mouse just ahead of the audio. It will turn into a little speaker and click. So these are the sounds that we want to use, and we're going to turn one of these into a kick drum. Now there are two. There's one here and one here, and it's up to us to decide which one is the best sound. I quite like this first one. So what we're going to do is just select this section. Once we have done this, we can zoom out and we have our markers at the right and left and right, and we click and drag the top one to the beginning of our section and the right one where we want it to end. By zooming in, we have more options in terms of where we can put our markers. I want my start to be right at the beginning of where the audio starts. Once I have this piece of audio will now only play this kick drum sound. We've edited out the rest of that sample. Now we have it edited, we need to go back into our drum track. So we select our drums, and in the bottom right hand corner select the drums option. This opens our impulse sampler again. We can now very simply drag that audio clip to a spare pad. At the minute this doesn't sound much like a kick drum, so we can change its tone, its character. One thing I'm going to do is turn this down, so I'm going to make it a lower pitch, and I can do this using the transpose. I'm going to turn it down to -8. Clicking on the play tab allows us to audition it. I'm also going to stretch the sample all the way to 100%. It gives us a slightly different feel. Pause the video here and have a go for yourself. We're now going to have a go at adding some clicks into our drum sound. And we're going to use the Sally Ride e-ticket sample for this. So in the same way that we did with the kick drum, we're going to double click it, and we have access to a whole range of sounds.
Well, you ever been to Disneyland?
Affirmative.
That was definitely an e-ticket.
Roger that, Sally.
So this is a recording taken from NASA, and what we're actually going to use is this little beep here.
Affirmative.
That was definitely an
This little bit here is what we want to use, and we're going to turn this into a little clicky sound. So I'm going to drag my markers as small as I can. I'm going to zoom in. Now you'll notice that when you get to a certain size you can't drag it in any further, but we can shorten this in the sampler if we wish. Clicking on the play button now only plays this little beep. We're going to import this into our impulse sampler. So we're going to select drums, open our sampler, and drag the audio file into our next tab. For this one, we're going to turn the transpose up, so we're going to make it higher pitched, and I'm going to turn it up by 7 semitones. But I want it to be much shorter. I want it to be much clickier. So I'm going to take my decay option and I'm going to turn it down to around 30 milliseconds. And there's our click. We don't have to be too exact, but you can adjust it to suit. Have a go at this one. We're now going to add a shaker type of percussion sound. And for this, we're going to use the Michael Bomber Frozen Ice. If we have a listen to this, so this is the sound of ice breaking. We're going to take a short section and turn it into a shaker sound. I'm going to zoom in at the beginning to begin with, and I'm going to use this section here. So I'm going to drag my start position to approximately 1.2.2. I'm going to drag my end all the way as small as I can. If I zoom in on this now, we can see I have a very short cracking sound. In the same way as we've done before, we're going to open up our impulse and we're going to drag this into our third track. We want this to be higher pitched, so I'm going to turn it up by 9 semitones. But I want it to be slightly shorter, so I'm going to turn the decay down to 108 milliseconds, or thereabouts. And there's our shaker sound. Notice it's got a little bit quiet. If you need to adjust the individual sample, then we can adjust certain elements, such as the volume, using this control on the right hand side. The last thing we're going to do is create a snare drum. And for this, we're actually going to use the same sonic boom that we did for our bass drum, but we're going to process it differently. Because we've already edited it, all I need to do is drag it in onto our fourth track. This time, however, we're going to transpose it up by 18 semitones. And we're going to shorten it to 520 milliseconds. But to give this some extra power, we're going to use the drive option. We're going to turn it on by clicking on SAT. This stands for saturation. And we're going to add a small amount of distortion to this sample. So I'm going to turn my drive up to 0.29. Just to give it a little bit of grunt. These are our main sections of our drums completed. We have a kick drum, we have a click, we have a shaker, and we have a snare, all created from found sound. The next thing we're going to do is add this into our project. I'm just going to stop my project from running, and I'm going to double click in one of the empty cells under my drums. Now this gives me full access to my drum track. This grid down here is 1 bar's worth of audio that I can populate with any pattern that I wish. So let's start with our kick drum. By clicking on play, it will simply loop this pattern. As you can see, there's no audio in there at the moment. So we're going to add some kick drums. I'm going to put one at the beginning by simply double clicking in this empty cell. And I'm going to put one halfway through at 1.3. I'm also going to add a lead in. Now let's add some of our clicks. and now some shakers. And now our snares. Once you're happy with your pattern, we've finished the drums. You can now move on to the next video tutorial where we'll look at the pad synth.